October 13, 1995, Columbia, South Carolina. As a tranquil Friday afternoon unfolds, three masked gunmen lie in wait, ready to turn the Shaw family's life into a living nightmare. Parker Shaw tries to open his garage door, unaware that his home is about to become a battleground. Ambushed and bound at gunpoint, Parker's horror intensifies as his wife and granddaughter are also taken hostage. Enter Amy Shaw, a bank teller arriving home from a long day. Her heart races as she's yanked inside by Christopher Jibber, the mastermind behind this diabolical plot. Forced to cooperate, Amy drives Jibber to her bank, leaving clues for authorities while he holds her at gunpoint. He manages to take thousands of dollars from the vault, and a harrowing night for the Shaw family ensues. But this is just the beginning. The police quickly apprehend two of the accomplices, but Jibber proves to be a slippery adversary. After his initial arrest, he stages a daring prison escape. His spree of robberies and evasions grips the nation, making him one of the most wanted men in America. Even after being recaptured, Jibber's cunning knows no bounds. He escapes prison multiple times, each escape more audacious than the last, leading authorities on a nationwide manhunt. This is the true story of the hunt for one of the most audacious and relentless criminals in America. It all started on October 13, 1995 on the South Carolina side, which is known to have a relaxed and community-oriented feel. It was on a Friday afternoon. Normally, Fridays in South Carolina tend to be a balance of the end-of-week hustle and the anticipation of a weekend full of enjoyment. Therefore, it's not uncommon seeing people cross the streets having some nice time. Seafood shacks are often buzzing with families having a meal together. Schools had let out their students, and one could see school buses on the roads. Parker and Brenda Shaw had gone to pick their granddaughter, Brianna, from school and were driving home. Brianna's mother, Amy Shaw, worked as a bank teller, so the reason why she left her daughter with her parents couldn't have been far-fetched. Bank tellers are known to carry out a lot of responsibilities which can be time-consuming, yet they faced inherent risks, especially the potential for robbery attacks. That's the fate Amy suffered in the hands of some desperate bank thieves. Going further, on getting home, Parker attempted to open the garage so he could drag into it. But to his surprise, the remote door opener wouldn't work. It's a bit unusual, but he never suspected any foul play. He thought it was just one of the issues with electronics. He decided to use an alternative means, which was to go inside his apartment and open the garage from inside while his wife and granddaughter waited in the car. Unknown to him, three masked men were already hiding in his apartment. One of them was Christopher Jibber, who would go on to commit numerous bank robberies. Immediately Parker got inside, he was accosted at gunpoint and was bound by duct tape. Outside, his wife was waiting for his return, but she ran out of patience. She decided to go check for herself what had delayed her husband. While she was walking toward the front door, the garage opened. Right there was one of the men. He pointed a gun at her, asking her to move inside. With her granddaughter in her hands, she navigated her way inside where her husband had been held captive. Now the stage is set for the chaos that would later happen. The gunmen ransacked every part of the house in search of money and other valuables. Once they had stolen the couple's money and credit cards, the mastermind, Jibber, informed the frightened couple that they actually came for their daughter, Amy, and the money at her bank. But Amy wasn't home yet. Surprisingly, the men said they'd wait for her. It appeared they already had a clue of Amy's routine. They knew when she left and returned home. They also knew she wouldn't stay back at work for any reason. After holding the Shaws in the bedroom for more than an hour, around 7:00 p.m., the lead gunman, accompanied by another man, led Brenda into the living room. Their intention was clear. They wanted to keep a lookout for Amy Shaw, who was expected to arrive home shortly. Meanwhile, the third man remained in the bedroom, keeping a close watch over Brenda's husband and their young granddaughter, ensuring they remained compliant and silent. In the living room, The lead gunman began to periodically open the front window, scanning the street for any sign of Amy's arrival. Not long after, Amy's car pulled up to the apartment. Exhausted from her day, she quickly made her way to the front door, eager to get inside, but something immediately struck her as odd. The door was locked, a rare occurrence for their home at that time of day. The unusual circumstance sent some unease through Amy. Her instincts kicked in, and she hesitated, sensing that something was seriously amiss inside. While Amy stood outside, trying to piece together what could have gone wrong, her thoughts were abruptly interrupted. The leader of the three-man gang suddenly opened the door, grabbing her forcefully and pulling her inside. The event was shocking and made her paralyzed for a brief moment. But the man wasted no time in asserting his control. He informed her that he had been watching her family for some time, meticulously studying their daily routines and schedules, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With the small talk out of the way, the man shifted his focus to the real reason they were there, obtaining the security details of the bank where Amy worked. He began interrogating her, demanding specific information about the bank's operations. At that point, Amy's heart raced, but her mind flashed back to her training as a bank teller. She knew that in situations involving armed robbers, the best approach was to remain calm and cooperative. Panicking or resisting could only escalate the danger. Drawing on this training, Amy braced herself and decided to comply with their demands, hoping that by doing so, she could protect her family and buy some time for a possible escape or rescue. When the gang leader demanded to know how to access the bank vault, Amy carefully explained that opening the vault required 2 separate codes, and she only possessed one of them. The second code was held by another employee. With this revelation, the gang leader was getting close to achieving his goal. Realizing that access to the vault was within reach, he decided it was time to go to the bank. However, before they left, Jibber issued a stern warning to Amy. Any attempt to alert authorities would place her family in immediate danger. Amy, fully aware of the threat hanging over her loved ones, knew she had no choice but to cooperate. She maintained her composure, determined to do whatever it took to protect her family. With her heart pounding, she prepared to leave the apartment with Jibber. As they stepped outside, Jibber made a calculated move to avoid drawing attention. He removed his mask, posing as just a random person accompanying Amy. He took a seat beside her in the car, ensuring that nothing appeared out of the ordinary to anyone who might glance their way. With Jibber sitting next to her, Amy drove to the bank where she worked, every turn of the wheel bringing them closer to a perilous confrontation inside the vault. While Amy was driving, he held her at gunpoint. Amy drove across the Savannah River, crossing from South Carolina into Georgia. She was in a tense situation. The thoughts of her family being in danger filled her head. But despite the fear, Amy knew she had to remain calm and collected to avoid making any mistakes that could escalate the situation. As they approached the bank, Jibber instructed Amy to drive slowly around the premises. He carefully scanned the surroundings, looking for any signs of activity that could indicate the presence of other employees, security personnel, or even customers. He was aware that the presence of an intruder could jeopardize his plan. But Amy took a bold step. Instead of heading straight for the entrance, she deliberately pulled up next to the automated teller machine. Her move was calculated. She knew that the ATM had a surveillance camera that recorded everything in its line of sight, including the faces of those who approached it. So, she positioned Jibber's face directly in front of the camera, hoping that the camera would capture a clear image of her captor's face, creating a crucial piece of evidence for law enforcement. She knew that could be her only chance to leave a clue in identifying the man once she was out of the ordeal. As soon as Jibber realized the coast was clear, he ordered Amy to drive to the back door so they could enter the bank without being noticed. However, he warned her to explain all of her actions for him to ascertain she wasn't trying to call the attention of security. Now, the two were inside the bank. Amy followed his earlier instructions as she showed her the alarm she could disable. When they were at the vault door, She reminded him about the other combination, which one of her co-workers had. But Jibber was less concerned about the steps she needed to take to get the code. All he wanted was to gain entrance. Otherwise, Amy's family risked being killed. Back at home, the masked men moved the Shaws to the living room so they could watch the front door. While the Shaws remained calm, they were hoping they would gain back their freedom. But the night kept getting longer. Suddenly, there was a gunshot. One of the men had mistakenly released the handgun. That sound was enough to alert the sleeping neighbors. However, rather than have a neighbor visit the Shaw's house and inquire about the sound, a strange car was seen approaching the house. It turned out to be that the occupants were Amy's brother-in-law and sister and their young daughter, arriving for a visit. At that time, the front door was unlocked. As soon as the three of them entered the house, the gunmen held them captive. Now, there were 6 hostages. At the bank, Jibber instructed Amy to call her coworker for the other combination. Her coworker was close to going to bed when her phone rang. She was surprised when Amy requested the combination with her. At first, she hesitated. However, once Amy told her the assailants had held her family hostage, she knew she was the only lifesaver Amy and her family had. While they were still talking, Jibber grabbed the phone from Amy, threatening the receiver about him coming to get the code from her himself. With the threat, she was aware of the event. She then gave Amy the second combination. However, Jibber insisted that the woman stayed on the line to avoid her calling the police. It's expected that the second combination should settle everything, but that's not the case. Amy entered the second part of the combination, but the vault wouldn't open still. At this point, Amy was getting more scared. The assailant thought Amy's coworker had given them the wrong combination. But Amy tried entering the combination again. This time, she collected herself. And click, the vault door opened. The assailant then asked Amy to identify the bin holding bait money that was either sequentially numbered or stained with exploding die packs. He left the cash untouched and went for the other ones. He began to load the money in a bag. Everything amounted to about $86,000. When he was done, he asked Amy to call her parents on another line. As soon as the line was picked, Jibber ordered the men to leave the house as their mission was accomplished. Jibber left the bank immediately. The next thing is that Amy triggered the alarm to alert the security. On the other side, she was worried about her family, so she had to put a call through to confirm their safety. Her mother spoke to her, warning her not to call the police that the armed men were still there. But it was too late. She already made the call. Aware that the police were already involved, the men decided to take their leave even though one of them initially hesitated. Richmond County Sheriff's officers responded to the call from the bank. They got to know that the crime was committed just across the river. Kenneth Booz was the lead investigator. He talked about how they sent out word to the Edgefield County Sheriff's Office, informing them of the possibility of the family still being held hostage. Edgefield County Sheriff's investigator Don Bullock received the call. "We had a family hostage situation. Respond with everything you've got as fast as you can get there." Although they were told the family already called, informing them that the gunman had left, but they had to be sure so it wouldn't be one of the tricks used by the assailants. The deputies approached the Shaw's home and called for possible intruders to surrender themselves. However, they were all gone and the family was safe. Upon examination, they realized nobody was physically hurt, but as expected, the event took a great toll on their mental health. The Shaws were asked to describe the men as best as they could, but they never saw their faces. The only thing they knew about them was that they were African American males, armed, and easily agitated. Parker alerted the police that the gunman went away with his son-in-law's car. Deputies issued an APB, and since the case was related to a bank robbery attack, the Richmond County authorities notified the FBI. Special Agent Jerry Jones of the Augusta/Georgia Resident Agency arrived to interview Amy. You'd recall the assailant that went with her to the bank removed his mask. Amy saw her face and went on to describe what he looked like. She also pointed to the direction in which he fled. She mentioned the possibility of her capturing an image of him. She then informed Special Agent Jones about the camera on the ATM. Unfortunately, there was no footage from the camera. Actually, the camera could only be activated by inserting a card into the machine. And since there was no card used, it didn't work. Even the surveillance cameras inside the bank made no capture. In other words, there was no trail that could lead to the arrest of the assailant. That marked the beginning of a search for evidence. At the North Augusta crime scene, investigator Bullock was briefed about the incident. Technicians from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division were invited. They found oily shoe prints on the garage floor. One of the assailants must have unknowingly stepped on it, causing his shoe to make prints on the floor. The prints were photographed as evidence in the event that some suspects were found. The technicians also searched through the house for any other evidence. They would later recover a single cartridge from the bullet fired in the living room. It was from a .38 caliber handgun. They went further to determine the prints, but there were none. Obviously, the assailants wore hand gloves throughout the time they committed the crime. At the top of the driveway, investigators also found a vehicle stuck in a ditch. They thought that the occupants were the suspects that had taken the vehicle from the Shaws. As soon as they ran into the ditch and couldn't get the vehicle out, they had to flee the scene to avoid being caught. Again, the technicians recovered some fingerprints from the vehicle, adding to the list of evidence. That's not all. Close to the scene, they recovered several items believed to have dropped from the fleeing men. The items included a shotgun, a .357 Magnum, clothes, masks, and gloves. Prior to the discovery of the evidences, police had little to no details to work with. However, with the recent evidences, they had more information at their disposal. Once they had full descriptions of the gunmen, the South Carolina and Georgia authorities put information out, stating the search for 3 masked men who held the Shaw family hostage and robbed a bank. Within an hour, there was an emergency call from an off-duty deputy. He was en route to the Shaw house when he spotted 2 men that roughly fit the description. He went ahead to question them. As later revealed by Sheriff's investigator Don Bullock, the men claimed to be playing basketball at a church. It's expected that they would be holding some kits, including a basketball or its paraphernalia. But there was none. It wasn't long before backup arrived. Although the church mentioned by the 2 men had a basketball court, there was enough evidence pointing to the fact that it had no lights on the court. So, could it be they were playing basketball in the dark? The story didn't add up. The deputies suggested that the men followed them to a police staging area near the Shaw house for further questioning, to which they agreed. They were later identified as Daniel Evans and LaMarco Roscoe. At the bank, FBI Special Agent Jerry Jones was informed about the 2 men in custody. Since the victim teller, that is, Amy, was in a stable and secure condition, Jones decided to leave the bank and head to South Carolina to interview the suspects. Arriving at the staging area almost around the same time as the suspects, he and Sheriff's investigator Kenneth Boost decided to question the suspects differently. It was a good strategy that helped them unravel the crime. Each interrogator would tell the suspect that the other already confessed, and the best thing for them is to also confess so their punishment would be mild. Initially, the suspects insisted they were playing basketball. But as they struggled to prove their exact location at the time the Shaw family was being held hostage, the investigators suspected that they were part of the crime. Jones, while interviewing Roscoe, attempted to find his greatest fear and weakness. It turned out to be the death penalty. Upon realizing his fear, Jones threatened Roscoe with the death penalty if he refused to confess. Roscoe eventually admitted his involvement in the crime. According to him, he only knew the group's leader by the name Chris with a last name that starts with a J. Immediately, he mentioned the name. An officer familiar with the area recognized the described person as Christopher Jibber. Jones went to interview the second suspect, Daniel Evans. Jones informed Evans that Roscoe had already confessed, which prompted Evans to begin telling the story of the robbery. Without prompting, Evans named Christopher Jibber as the third suspect. From the interviews, it became clear to the authorities that Jibber was the mastermind of the robbery, while Roscoe and Evans were merely followers. The three men had been together a few days to the day they robbed the bank. They had mapped out the strategy they'd use to have a successful operation. Now Jones was done with the preliminary interviews. He also learned that a pager number was recovered from one of the suspects. An officer called the number, and the receiver identified himself as Chris Jibber, the mastermind they were looking for. Without being asked, Jibber quickly put up a defense, claiming to be 100 miles away in Mount Vernon, Georgia. By so doing, he already implicated himself. Since authorities knew his house, they went to look for him. But he was not home. He was at large. Throughout October 1995, authorities were actively searching for Jibber for his role in armed kidnapping and bank robbery. At the request of FBI agents and Richmond County deputies, Jibber's mother called him on his cell phone, advising him to turn himself in. Jibber arrived with his girlfriend around 1 a.m. at 19. Jibber was already on probation for burglary and had escaped from a detention center. Investigators took Jibber and his girlfriend in for questioning. Jibber admitted knowing the two Daniel Evans and Lamarco Roscoe, but denied his involvement in the crimes. According to him, he was with his girlfriend and another female friend in Mount Vernon, Georgia, on a movie outing. However, when the two girls were interviewed, their statements did not align with Jibber's story. Realizing that his lies had been punctured, Jibber changed his alibi, claiming he was involved in a drug deal in Atlanta, Georgia. Still, authorities were not convinced. Upon further questioning, Jibber admitted his involvement in the crime but claimed he was part of a larger criminal organization and could not reveal more due to fears for his family. He was not ready to accept the blame. Eventually, Jibber was charged with multiple crimes, including conspiracy, carjacking, kidnapping, and armed bank robbery. His partners, Evans and Roscoe, pleaded guilty to state charges of burglary and were sentenced to 30 years in prison. As for Jibber, the case against him was technical. There was no scientific evidence linking him directly to the crimes. However, the testimonies of the victim and her family helped to build a case against him. Jibber was found guilty of all the crimes and was eligible for a life sentence without parole. While awaiting sentencing, he was held at the Columbia County Detention Center. Surprisingly, on March 27, 1996, he managed to escape with another inmate with the name Jerome Fersenbay. The escape was made possible while construction work was going on at the jail. Authorities sent out a search team. But despite extensive searches and roadblocks, Jibber and Fersenbay remained elusive. Their escape posed a significant security threat to the Shaw family, leading authorities to create awareness and alert the public. The FBI notified the public to be on the lookout for two dangerous escaped bank robbers in North Carolina and Georgia. After a period of mounting frustration, a surprising lead emerged. FBI Special Agent Doug Fender, who was initially investigating a separate auto theft case, stumbled upon a crucial connection to Jibber. While examining a stolen vehicle linked to the case, Fender discovered that the vehicle had been transferred to one of Jibber's known associates. Further investigation revealed that Jibber's girlfriend and another accomplice had played a significant role in his escape. They had provided not only the stolen vehicle but also essential supplies. This getaway vehicle was crucial for Jibber and his partner, Fersenbay, as it facilitated their rapid departure from the scene of the escape. The supplies included items such as clothing and provisions, which were strategically stashed at a prearranged location for their use. This breakthrough in the investigation helped to piece together the escape plan and led authorities to a hotel where Jibber's girlfriend was working. The interrogation of the girlfriend and her associate ultimately provided critical insights into Jibber's movements and his network of support during his flight from justice. Jibber and Fersenbay used the stolen car to continue their crime spree, embarking on a series of bank robberies along the East Coast. Owing to their history of escape, they became bolder and targeted multiple financial institutions. The car, which had become a critical piece of evidence, was eventually spotted in Lumberton, North Carolina. They had robbed a bank at gunpoint, forcing the employees to comply with their demands. The heist fetched them a substantial sum of money, but their criminal activities did not stop there. Shortly after the bank robbery, they went on to commit a brazen carjacking. They ambushed a couple working in their garage and threatened. The couple was left with no choice other than to hand over their vehicle to the two of them. Although their actions left their victims traumatized, they were able to provide descriptions that led to the recovery of the stolen car. Still, Jibber and Frierson Bay were undeterred. They'd moved from one location to another, getting past law enforcement authorities who were seeking to arrest them. Their ability to evade capture while also going about their criminal activities made them a threat along the East Coast. The fugitives were also tracked to New Jersey, where they robbed several additional banks. Since the FBI was after them, they followed the trail of robberies, extracting information from the public, including eyewitnesses. Eventually, they got a tip-off that led them to a motel in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, where they believed Frierson Bay was hiding. Acting on this information, FBI agents, along with local law enforcement, surrounded the motel. There was palpable tension as they set up a perimeter in preparation for a possible confrontation. The fugitives were getting deadlier. In addition, a SWAT team was deployed to ensure the operation was successful. After a standoff that tested the resolve of both the agents and Frierson Bay, the SWAT team moved in. They found Frierson Bay inside, armed with a loaded firearm, and in possession of a significant amount of stolen cash, likely from one of the recent bank robberies. There, Frierson Bay was apprehended. However, there was still no sign of his accomplice, Jibber, leaving the authorities to continue their relentless pursuit of the elusive fugitive. Frierson Bay was arraigned before the court and bagged 19 years in federal prison for his involvement in the string of bank robberies and escape from prison. Jibber, the mastermind behind the crimes, remained elusive and continued to evade capture. The FBI, recognizing the threat he posed, placed a $10,000 bounty on his head. They added him to their 10 most wanted list, making his capture a top priority. The manhunt for Jibber intensified, with law enforcement agencies across multiple states on high alert. The breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source, a private citizen who identified him from a television program. America's Most Wanted had tipped the FBI about Jibber's possible location. He suspected that he was hiding out at the home of a minister in Atlanta, Georgia. On May 9, 1996, FBI agents in collaboration with sheriff's deputies moved in on the location. Jibber, who had been living under the radar, was taken by surprise when the agents arrived. He was apprehended without incident, ending his months-long run from the law. In his possession were a semi-automatic pistol and a huge amount of money. His arrest marked a significant victory for the FBI and brought relief to the communities that had been terrorized by Jibber's criminal activities. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. But his arrest didn't end his menace. Just 6 weeks after his recapture, while he was awaiting trial, he escaped again from his cell. He had used a saw blade to cut through a window and scaled a double fence. All efforts, including the use of tracking dogs and infrared technology, to track him down yielded no results. Several days went, and there was still no sign of Jibber. However, some days later, an off-duty sheriff's deputy in Appling, Georgia, thought he spotted someone who looked like Jibber. According to him, the man he saw was limping, seemingly injured. The deputy immediately notified the station, and officers were dispatched to the area. After combing the area, they found the man in a wooded area behind a school and apprehended him. He turned out to be Jibber, the fugitive. Now, Jibber was back in custody. This time around, they made sure he wouldn't escape again. 2 weeks later, he was sentenced for robbing the Augusta Bank and kidnapping Amy Shaw and her family. On July 11, 1996, District Judge Bowen Jr. sentenced Jibber to imprisonment for life, plus 5 years for conspiracy to commit armed bank robbery. In addition to his prison sentence, Jibber faced significant financial penalties for his crimes. The court imposed a special assessment of $300, restitution totaling $89,270 to compensate the victims of his robberies, and a hefty fine of $50,000. These financial obligations were intended to provide some measure of justice and deterrence. However, by March 6, 2008, Jibber had managed to pay only a fraction of these amounts, with just $4,054.08 having been collected. Jibber was also ordered to serve his time at the federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas, a facility known for its high security and housing some of the most dangerous criminals in the United States. He was sentenced without the possibility of parole. In other words, under normal circumstances, he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The weight of this reality left Jibber with only one desperate option: escape. True to his reputation as a hardened criminal, Jibber attempted to break free from Leavenworth just weeks into his sentence. He had hidden under a prison laundry truck. Unfortunately, he was discovered before the truck got to the front gate. After his failed escape attempt, Jibber was swiftly recaptured by prison authorities. Then they recognized the persistent threat he posed and his clear intent to always flee once in prison. They decided that stricter measures were necessary to prevent any future escape attempts. Consequently, Jibber was transferred to the maximum security federal penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia. This facility, known for its formidable security protocols, was designed to house some of the most dangerous and high-risk inmates in the federal prison system. The prison had enhanced security features, which included multiple layers of surveillance, heavily fortified barriers, and constant monitoring by highly trained guards, making it one of the most secure prison environments in the country. In this setting, escape would be far more challenging, if not virtually impossible. The move to Atlanta was intended to minimize the likelihood of any further escape attempts by Jibber, ensuring that he would remain securely behind bars to serve out his sentence. Later, Jibber was moved to the Federal Correctional Institution, Thompson, where he is incarcerated till today. Since then, there hasn't been any record of his attempt to escape again, and that's the end of the man who terrorized the East Coast, especially banks, in a series of robberies. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos.